This is the Future of the Future show. I am your host, Mateo Berbejicio. I have been deeply immersed in the technology world for the last 5 years of my career. I'm not an engineer myself, but I work with engineers daily. And I've interviewed quite a few technology leaders to learn more about their story and their path in this industry. I always learn something new. Most stories are not a simple straight line. There is a beginning, a spark. There's lots of hard work. There are opportunities and paths taken, decisions, mentors, lessons learned, discoveries by chance and preparation alike. Today, we will dive deep into the story of Jeff Bridwell, a seasoned technologist and software engineering leader with over 3 decades of experience building systems and leading high-performing teams across fintech, e-commerce, and supply chain. Jeff is not only passionate about the craft of engineering, but also about growing people, fostering clarity, and making systems work for real-world impact. In this episode, we will explore Jeff's journey into tech, his leadership philosophy, what he values in teams, how technology has evolved since he got started, and what he sees coming next. We will also touch on what keeps him grounded outside of work. Whether you are an engineer, a leader, or just someone thinking about the future of technology and teams, this conversation is packed with practical insights and thoughtful reflections. Jeff, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to be here with you today. It's a great opportunity, and I appreciate your introduction, and I look forward to the conversation.
Very good. Jeff, tell us a little bit, what do you do in the world of technology?
Okay. I help companies deliver value and positive outcomes, both for their customers and for their people. I lead software engineering groups, generally multiple teams, 2, 3, 4, 5 teams at a time. I've worked in a bunch of different contexts, product contexts, transformation contexts, modernization and operations, consulting. So I bring all of those experiences to my work, and it helps me to be very pragmatic and grounded in my decision making as a leader when I'm in doing my work. So go ahead.
No, that's amazing. I wanted to go back in memory lane and ask you, how did you get started in technology? When you were growing up, did you think you were going to become an engineer? Was that a thing, or how did it happen?
No. I actually studied literature and philosophy in college and was not very science or math motivated. So I had a love of like concepts and ideas and systems. I had an opportunity as a student at Reed College, which is where Steve Jobs went to start using Macs at a very early age, and that started my interest in technology. I'm sorry, Mateo. I'm losing the thread here.
No worries, Jeff. We can edit this whole part, so don't worry.
That's fine.
This is not going live, so don't worry. Everything that's happening right now, we just clip it, and that's it.
Yeah. So I'm gonna make sure I'm getting your question, because I'm feeling a little nervous. Your question, let me play it back real quick, was
how did you get started in technology?
Yeah, pretty much. Okay. So I had an interest in college that was piqued by working with Macs. Even as a kid, like I saw kind of the emergence of like video games and music were big deals. I had friends that were in like video production and musicians, and a lot of that stuff kind of, as a young man, fascinated me. I didn't finish college. I was 19 years old. I needed to find work. I
Right.
didn't want to work in warehouses in the heat. So I started like applying the skills that I had and my curiosity to technology and was able to get a job that involved basically like working with spreadsheets and like sort of writing macros.
Right.
And then I taught myself Unix, and then I taught myself a database, and and then things started to happen for me as a technologist, really, honestly, from there. So it wasn't my definitely not like my life plan to grow up and be an engineer and do what I've done for the last 30 plus years, but it's been an amazing journey also getting into this. So
Great. Great. And what is it that you like the most about software engineering? When you started, when you were learning, the
yeah.
macros and Linux, et cetera, and all the things that you learned, and you were just you on the computer and you were doing your stuff. What is it that you liked about it?
Well, there were two pieces. I think one is I wanted to learn how things worked. And I'm going to show my age, but I would go out and buy like PC Magazine, and they would have like how a modem works, how a disk drive works. So I learned actually a lot about kind of the mechanics of technology and how things worked. The database that I actually learned at that time had amazing documentation, so I learned a ton, honestly, about how databases work and paging and all of the things that are involved in those systems. So I really had a fascination just for understanding how things got built, put together. And honestly, it doesn't surprise me. Both my parents were both entrepreneurs. My father ran a construction business.
Right.
And there's a certain, I mean, construction is a physical thing. You have to understand the parts and the ingredients you need. And so for me, being able to kind of learn that was really important. And the other thing, I had a really great opportunity very early on to work with a company that was doing like workflow and imaging and working with like very like sophisticated technology, for 1994 or 1995, which
Right.
really kind of ignited my passion for kind of what things could be, beyond what I was learning, in my first few jobs.
Got it.
Um,
And when did you start? So tell me more about, okay, you got started as a software engineer, you started getting better, right? And you start getting, you know,
yeah,
bigger and bigger assignments, right? And then at some point in time, you started leading teams, right? How did
correct.
that happen? When did that
Yeah.
happen?
Yeah. My first opportunity was remarkably early in my career, honestly. It was in 1997. So I had gotten my first software engineering job um, at that company, which sold warehouse management systems. And we were doing a lot of Y2K
Right.
transformation for companies around the world, mostly in the US. I had the opportunity to lead a project for CDS, which is a very large um, pharmacy company here in the US.
Yes.
Um, and actually, the goal was to completely replace all the warehouse management software in a 1.2 million square foot building. So this is me, probably 1996, close to 30 years old. First
Right.
job as a software engineer, and I'm responsible for that. I think because I was a good communicator and was passionate about learning and understanding things, I was also asked to manage other people that were doing my role for other customers. So I was leading other uh, project leads and then had my own team that I was leading as well. And that went on for several years, pretty much the back half of the 90s was my first role as a manager. So, and then I went back into some work doing software development. And then there's a second round, which we can get into a little bit later, which started about 10 years later.
Got it.
So,
So you start leading teams, and I always, um, I've seen a lot of people, and it happened to me as well, going from the individual contributor role to all of a sudden you are leading a team, right? And the analogy that we always make, this came um, actually, I think it was on an IBM training, and then a consultant in Uruguay taught me this, and I love it. It's like picking someone that is, you're riding a plane and a passenger is behaving very well, and you go like, oh, we see that you are behaving very well as a passenger. We think you could be a pilot, right? And then all of a sudden you put them in the cockpit and you go like, okay, fly the plane, right? And you go
What could
like,
go wrong, right?
well, I mean, you go and you look at all the things right in the plane. You go like, what do I do now? And we don't realize, but many times what we do to people that we put in leadership positions is kind of that, right? You are putting a leadership
Oh,
position, and everyone
absolutely.
assumes you are going to know what that leadership position is about and what you are supposed to do. So let me go back into those first experiences and you're
Uh-huh.
learning on the way, right?
Yeah.
What do you think, or what did you start quickly realizing were the most important skills you needed to be a leader? You talked about communication, you talked about a few things, but what comes to mind?
At that time, I would have basically said it was really important to be very professional.
Right.
And then to me, being a professional isn't specific to any field. It really involves taking your customer seriously, being prompt, thorough, kind of giving them quality and building trust and earning respect. Um, that didn't always happen. I have to say, I have a few kind of battle scars from things, where that didn't work out. But it was a lot for me. We were like this was before Agile, so we would write software for like 2 years, and then we'd show up in
Ah,
a huge warehouse, and then you start trying things, and if something goes wrong in the warehouse, you suddenly like understand like why these things matter. If you didn't know before, you certainly know when something goes live and it's not working because everyone's knocking on your door and telling you have you screwed up their day. So I think that that ability of mine to build trust both with my people and with the customer was very, something that I had a knack for. But a lot of the other things around process and communication and um, were a little bit more complicated, honestly. There were, of course, I can remember in that time, like I was working, go to work at like midnight and work until like 3 or 4 in the afternoon. We were trying to get the warehouse up and running. So there was a lot of pressure, honestly. There were many people, on the site and a lot of like people showing up. And this, you don't see this as much maybe nowadays, but then there would be a lot of people that would be traveling and they would all be there. Suddenly you go from like a team of 5 or 6 to 20.
right,
And then, trying to coordinate that becomes a different kind of a challenge, right? And so I a lot of those skills around like delegating and understanding who can lead even without the title,
right.
right? Were things that I learned kind of along the way, especially in that first job. So,
Got it. So, how did you do that? I have a twofold question. What
mhm.
do you value the most in team members, right? In people that are working in your team, what do you value the most? But also, how do you pick on that, right? Once you know what you want to see in someone in your team, how do you realize if they have it or not?
um, I I I believe I expect some of the same things around professionalism that I do out of myself. So curiosity, willingness to learn, some basic skills, luck, relative to your role that you're in. Um, I I think I've always enjoyed being around smart people, which is another reason why I like software engineering so much. There's lots of very smart people, and we're all different, right? And some of us are very good at the people part, some of us are good at the technology part, some of us are good at both. I So part of my process was to kind of understand both, skills, experience, but more than that, like the big things like I constantly mentor engineers on is like skill, decision making, communication, right? And so I started to do that where I could know that I could trust certain people to handle certain things and to take leadership and run with things. And that gives them opportunities. It also gives me kind of gets me out of the middle of being, a dependency for everything. So
Right.
I don't, no one kind of taught me that exactly, but I figured it out. And I had some good mentors as well, honestly. There were good project leaders and other people around me that were helping me, maybe even when I didn't notice.
Right. Is there one mentor or that you remember, or
Yeah, there
one
was a guy
lesson that
named
you
Art.
remember?
Yeah, his name was Art Hiley, and I was 30 and he was probably 60.
What
Kind of
what
like,
Yeah,
yeah.
what did you learn from that? What was the main lesson that you
Well,
oh
he
wow,
was
this
very
was
he was very reserved, very big picture, well, very careful about both setting expectations, but also expectations that could be delivered against. He was meticulous about those things, and I was more likely just to sort of say whatever I kind of came in my head in the moment at that
right.
time. So I learned a lot from him about just sort of thinking things through and planning ahead and starting to think bigger about what it is that was we were accomplishing. So, and he was a real steadying influence for me, truthfully. It was a challenging role at times. So,
Very good, very good. It's so important, right? Mentors have such an impact on our career. And
they
um,
do.
do you remember a special moment where you had to mentor someone and be that person for them?
Um, yeah, I mean, I've from that time period or just overall in
What
general.
whatever moment in your career,
Yeah, I've actually am pretty proud. There are a lot of people that have worked for me that have gone on to have very successful careers on their own. And um, like there was a guy, his name is Kurt Han. He's now an enterprise architect over at a big financial firm. And
right?
when he first came to me and said, I want to be an enterprise architect, I was like, are you really sure? Because you have like a big scope, but not a heck of a lot of power, honestly.
Yeah,
So I think I've been pretty good at, honestly, with people of both being able to talk with them about what the role is like, because I've done a lot of the roles myself. I mean, really, the only role that I haven't done on a full-time basis for at least a couple of years is being a tester.
okay.
But I've written requirements, led teams, been a software engineer, architect, so I've done a lot of different roles, so I can speak with people, not just like, oh yeah, this is the job that'll give you the most money, but is this the job that you really want? Is this the job that will let you that kind of will turn into, or the role that will turn into what you want? So I think there are people like her and many others, honestly, that I've worked with, and that's a key thing. Like to me, it's a big, honestly, as a leader, I want it to be a virtuous circle, right? Where
Right.
we're our generative culture, where we're greater than the sum of our parts. I love basketball.
Right.
So if you can have a basketball team that has five superstars and they don't ever win.
Yeah.
And then you can watch another team that has guys that maybe aren't quite as good, but they play better together. And to me, I always will take the team that's less the superstars, but more the people that are willing to both give and take with each other on behalf of, the greater good. That's very important to me. So I think the mentoring has kind of come both ways for me, out to other people around me and also into me as well. Both, I'm fortunate, truthfully.
How do you achieve that? So building high performing teams, it's very very important. It's a topic that it's close to my heart as well.
Yeah.
Um, and I like what you said about the sum of the parts, right, being greater than the individual parts, and the Um, what comes into play when you are
Yeah.
finding that perfect fit? Is it an ego that is big but not that big, or what do you need to take out, right? Like huge egos or toxic people, what will hamper that
Yeah.
alignment?
Yeah. Well, I'm just for me on a very human basic level, I'm not fast to form opinions about anybody,
Okay.
which is actually really good for me. I've seen a lot of leaders come in and they immediately are making decisions about people with very limited. So I generally, when I show up, want to really get to know people a little bit, and I'm willing to invest that time. And I, yeah, there occasionally are people that are, have an ego or won't. I mean, I certainly went through this myself, where I'd be working under someone and they were kind of protecting their job. And I learned from that I didn't want that in my groups. So, and it also, so there's a lot of benefits, like to me, and that's part of what I try to encourage with people. When I took my last role, I went to everyone in the first week is like, organizations have hierarchy. It's like everyone, whether they reported to me or my peers or
Yeah.
above me, it's like, there's always hierarchy, but when I'm in the room, I really hope you can like treat me like somebody else that's just not in the room. I don't want to be your I just don't want to be your boss. I don't want to go around telling everybody what to do.
Right.
That will not work.
Right.
Honestly, I think that alone for a lot of people starts to kind of provide some possibility. Like, because I really, when I join or when with a team, I don't know who's going to really be good, who has curiosity, who wants to, deep dive in a lot of times. And that's what I've seen over and over. Lots of teams have good people. They're just kind of not even being given the chance.
Yeah.
So that's important to build trust and also to give people a chance, truthfully, like as a human being and as an employee, both. Don't. So that's how I start whenever I'm in a team. And that then and I honestly I'm not that guy anymore that can just do everything. Like I don't know everything. So I
Right.
really do need their help.
Right.
And I tell them this as well, right? And I rely on them. And I think that'll as well kind of like and I take seriously not just like get this project done for me so we can celebrate tomorrow. No, it's more like let's work together to kind of get you where you want to be. And I'm gonna not just give you one chance. I want to like help you grow as a person and as an engineer or an architect or whatever you want to be as you go on in your career. So
I love it. Give people a chance. It's a nice title for our episode, and surely for a song. Um,
okay.
but let me ask you this: on
Uh,
the flip side of that coin, when you give people a chance and you try
uh,
to work with them and you try to help them
yeah.
grow, what is the tipping point of someone disappointing you and you going like, yeah, no, this is just a no?
Um, I think earlier in my career it was hard for me to get there, honestly.
Okay.
Maybe not always a good thing. I think as I've gone on in my career, I've started to realize that if there is dysfunction inside of a team and it's not being resolved and it involves a person or two, that has a very cascading impact on the whole team.
Yeah.
And then I'll start having one-on-ones and I'm talking with 5 people on a team I'm leading, and they're all talking about one person. That they're right there alone, right? There's kind. So I think I am like I mentioned earlier, I'm willing to give people a chance, and I'm not going to go around and like look over everybody's shoulder and judge them on their work. If I start to get consistent and concerning feedback about people, I think I have an obligation to understand what's going on and also have the conversation with them about whether they want to do something about it or not. Right? I mean, I don't, I think it's especially bad when that kind of drags on for a year or two or more and just really poisons the morale of the team of a team. So
Yeah, agreed.
yeah.
100%. Um, let's talk about technology and how it has evolved since you got started,
Okay.
and where do you think it's going?
Oh. Well, I touched on a little bit when I was earlier in our discussion. I like a lot of the nuts and bolts of what we now think of technology, were the things that first kind of made me passionate. I remember there was an ad I saw once about a phone, and it was like, and they had behind it, they had like a VCR and like five or six things that I would have paid money for back in the 80s.
Yeah.
And they're all now in this one thing, which is also now has artificial intelligence.
Yeah, 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 yeah,
So
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that there's a huge, hard to kind of fathom transition from like infrastructure being precious and expensive to it being cheap and freely available,
Yeah.
which is really upended. But I know people probably, if for any of your listeners who are cursing people like me for building monoliths,
Mm,
there are actually reasons why we did it. Like if it was going to take $200,000 in 6 months to get the infrastructure and you had $200,000 to write the software, you had to cram everything into that piece of hardware because that was your constraint.
right, right.
In many ways, that constraint is gone, which is a little concerning in some ways. I think infrastructure isn't infinite.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's a huge change. And then what I've noticed about it is made everything that people build much, much more atomic. So now I like it, like I would have written 20 or 30,000 lines of code in a single program at the beginning of my career. And now I have, you know, a Lambda that's basically just connected to like a single function or class in my code. So the infrastructure has become very, very freely available. However, the complexity has gone up extraordinarily as a result. Like understanding what a system does, where it is, what we depend on, all of that is ridiculously complex nowadays. And an area, honestly, I've actually been exploring that some using AI, working on doing things like building a system in a language that I don't know.
right,
Um, Trying to do some of the things that I've nagged my teams about doing that were I thought were good things to do, but sort of learning for myself. Okay, is this as easy as I thought it was, or is it actually harder? Because sometimes it felt like they were just saying no because what I'm learning, honestly, is that again, complexity. There's less mastery of anything in particular, and everyone is being kind of forced to like figure things out as they go, which can be very stressful, truthfully. And that's a bigger change as well, which I can touch on a little more if you're curious. I think there's like a saturation as engineers that we have with technology now.
right.
Like we're constantly like it's never around us. I look at my phone and it will say you've picked up my phone for 8 hours today. And like, what did I do before 2007 with those 8 hours?
Yeah,
So it's very there's a lot of that's kind of the human element of it, where there's pressure to do more. We can do more, but are we doing things just because? Are we doing things that we need? The decision making and the communication start to come back in. So, and which is it's very interesting, and there's a lot of narrative, honestly, right now with AI about I'll get rid of all the busy work. And then I'm left with just this green field where I can just make great decisions all day. and then execute on them.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm not so sure that we are all like humans are necessarily like we can't just be all in a sweet spot all the time where we're just making decisions, right?
Right.
Perfect decisions, right? Sometimes the little things honestly are a break. They're and they also reinforce our learning, honestly, for bigger things that we need to understand. Like,
Yeah.
if you can't compose a system that where you know almost nothing about how it works, that seems a little concerning to me, truthfully. Which I think is a narrative that's also sort of emerging now. So I yeah, I infrastructure, um, complexity in terms of how we build things, and then kind of the human effects, like how we get saturated by technology and what that can do to us as humans, honestly. Like we're like more technology focused and not enough people focused, and we miss things that are really important because it really what are we ultimately doing is building things for humans, not just for computers,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, I think I talk a lot about this with a lot of people, and we keep going, we go in circles, right? And we go back to education, right? And because things have changed so much and they are changing so fast right now, the hardest place I can imagine myself to be is being an educator and trying to prepare children, teenagers, and college kids for the future, right? It's kind of it's uncertain, and it's clear that change will be, it's always been a constant, but it's going to become like a super fast change will become, it's a constant right now. Not only change, but super fast and super deep, right? And so how do you teach them that critical analytical thinking that they need, um, and that people used to learn with a lot of practice as well. And what you're saying about, us making decisions all the time and not having that rudimentary practice, right?
Right.
Uh, that, Karate Kid walks in, walks out, whatever type, hours and hours and hours of repetition that will teach you something else, right? How do young kids learn that? And as you were speaking, I was thinking, okay, you know, the architect mind, you've been in so many roles that you can project and see the architecture, and then the way that you are by coding is different because the different implications and the architecture, right? How
It's
do you
this.
teach that to someone that is younger and it's just like, oh no, I want to vibe code this and I want to, go through it, etc.
Yeah, okay. Good question. I think for me, the first thing is I start to talk with them about architecture. I don't like hold back. So if I'm speaking to, say, someone that's a junior or just starting, I may not talk about the overall architecture of everything, but I may start to talk with them about the implications of the system that they're working on and what those are. It's part of my work with them, honestly, is to do that. And I notice you're a musician, like anybody nowadays can make music. They don't need to learn how to play the drums or play a piano or whatever, right? I don't think there's a substitute. Like I don't like I actually take notes by hand
Right.
because I remember things better if I write them down. It's literally the physical act of me using my hand to write it down that helps me remember. And I think those basic skills, I think, would continue to be important in education. Like, I don't think you can just jump to the advanced stuff and expect that things are going to work without having some of the fundamentals that are needed. So if I come back to the junior engineer, I will talk with them about stories they're working on or bugs they're fixing, and did you think about this? Did you think about that? Building their sense of perspective and thinking bigger than where they are at this moment, because no one else may even bother with that
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
them, right? They're all too busy. The junior engineers really get it bad, right? Because people won't say it, but they're annoyed at them because they're not being productive enough, and then they have to help them. And it's a very like common, like you hear it all the time. Like, the senior or principal engineer who's griping about how much time they help other people, and that can really get under people's skin.
Yeah.
So I think it's important to nourish that honestly and or nurture it in an organization and also to pair people, like give people who are a little more junior an opportunity to work with someone a little more senior, like build teams within teams that are so that there's a chance to I mean some of my most important learnings have been just sitting side by side with somebody and watching them do something. Then I asked them like, how did you do that? Why'd you do this? And I can remember like one time from like 1993 where I spent like an afternoon and I learned more in that afternoon. If I learned on myself, I probably would never have learned about half of what I learned that afternoon.
Right. Right.
I don't know that you can, maybe you can get that with a video class or whatever, pull it rather than push it. I think having a teacher honestly is important,
Yeah.
right? And whether in the context of a team or through a leader or whatever, I don't know that you can escape that personally. So
Jeff, what is next for you? What type of role would you like to tackle next?
I would love to work on another transformation or modernization project. I think I have a lot to offer. Um, there's quite a journey, and I've been through all the different pieces of this, anywhere from like 6, 7 year type initiatives to 1 to 2 year type initiatives. And there's that perspective that you get from going through them and understanding kind of where you are. I joke with people like the beginning of any program or project is a time for like unfounded hope and foolish optimism. And the end is a time where you literally just have to get it done.
Yeah.
No matter what you thought you were going to build, you have to get it done and you have to stop to go on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that cycle, whether it's like a big project or a week or a month or whatever, it happens over and over. So I would love to be able to work for a company that would allow me to do that and help lead. Um, I'd love to work for a company that is thinking not just about like the next month or the next quarter, but beyond that, and is also really focused on how their people kind of fit in what they're trying to accomplish. I think it's really important to have that sense of sort of safety, I think, for people that they're in an organization where they're not going to get thrashed around. I'd like that as well. I think that looks like the Series B or up startup or maybe mid-sized company. I don't know that I'm signed up to do another big corporate thing at this point in my life.
Right.
But
Right.
I feel like that would be a great fit for somebody like me. And I'm also very personally progressive on like architecture and new things. So I know how to like challenge productively and introduce change that may not be, conventional. Um, and a lot of times you need that, especially in those bigger initiatives to get them done. Where you start and how you grow as you go through it is it takes a lot. So, um, yeah, I think that's it. So leading multiple teams, working for a company that doesn't think about just the next few months in terms of accomplishments and what we need to do to sustain a bigger team. Yeah, would be awesome.
Good stuff. Jeff, I have one final random question to you. During
Uh-huh.
your career, what has
Uh-huh.
been your constant go-to activity to unwind when you are not working?
I know you said one, I'm going to give you two.
Okay.
One of them is just getting outside. That's a bunch. It's taken a lot of forms for me: running, walking, gardening. Um, very important for me. I grew up um, in the woods. Spent a lot of time outside as a young man. And then I mentioned saturation earlier. I think for many of us, like getting away from our room, getting
Yeah,
away from us, all of that is very important. Second thing for me is a lot of passion and curiosity around things that I've collected and read, um, books, music, comics,
right.
uh, movies, spirituality, philosophy. I've had lots of pretty big and deep interests in my life, and so I realized that channeling my curiosity, kind of regardless of whether it's on a personal or professional level, is really important for me and how I grow and learn as a person. So,
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Jeff. This has been an amazing conversation. I enjoyed it very much. I hope that you did as well, and I hope that we can get to do this again sometime again in the future.
that would be beautiful. It's a pleasure meeting you and working with you on this. I look forward to another opportunity down the road to talk, and certainly hope that we keep in touch. It would be great to get to know you better. So.